The language of deceit. Notes and extracts. Necessary change. Heroes seek their own answers, but that gets tiring, even for most of the heroes. Not so long ago, nationalism was popular. Fascism was popular. Popularity was popular. Leadership was popular. Hitler appeared twice on the cover of Time magazine. The 20th century saw the greatest advancements in technology, from transportation and travel to fashion and freedoms. Society became electric and eclectic and obsessed with the science of things. These times of transformation brought with themselves great opportunity for wealth, and as a result of wealth, influence. Those with money had power, and with power comes the quest for control, and with it the ambition to have a responsible hand in the future development of man. The way was forward. The aim was progress. At least, this is what we were sold. Leadership was sought in all areas of life. Solutions were discovered, answers were invented. Suddenly everything was possible. Nothing was impossible. Life was all about a search for fortune, and fortune was the business of soldiers and men. It was man's duty to solve the problem of democracy, which simply seemed to pit the people against the people. Or maybe that was always the idea. You see, everybody had an opinion, but only a select few had the inclination and ability to act upon their beliefs and desires, regardless of the cost. The original plan to form a dictatorship in the US and put an end to the democratic presidency of Franklin D. Roosevelt and his policies was masterminded by the wealthiest elites in the country. It was claimed by many that Roosevelt's removal of the gold standard was a threat to the wealth of the corporate masters of America. The rise of socialism in Germany and its ability to sever itself from a debt-based economy was an invitation to follow an alternative path, or even return to the straight and narrow. The fact is, there was far more in common between the USA and Germany than anybody really cared to admit. The fact is, there probably still is. Considering it was a time of deep economic crisis, and further considering the wealth and power of the men behind it, the plot could well have and should have been successful. However, one man, an insider, paradoxically chosen to lead the transformation, would play the important role of bringing this conspiracy to the attention of the US Congress and subsequently the public. Apparently, not everything could be controlled. Major General Smedley Darlington Butler is a long-forgotten, true Avenger-style hero of America. A man who held 2 Medals of Honor and who was supposed to lead 500,000 veterans against the US government in a military coup. The initial thought to form an army of veterans to take over the USA came from the examples of Mussolini's dictatorship in Italy and fascist military-style organizations such as the Cross and Fire in France or the Stormtroopers in Germany. In the 1920s in the US, Mussolini was very popular, not just among Italian Americans, but among some reformers as well, who were inspired by certain features of his authoritative dictatorship. By giving the unsatisfied veterans the hope and vision of a better future, perhaps one without a potential worldwide conflict, they would be able to manipulate them into becoming key instruments to make transformation a reality. In the USA, veterans got disgruntled when they got paid just $60 and a train ticket back home for their military service following World War I. After numerous compromises and national protests, the US Congress passed legislation in 1924, and veterans received a pension in the form of bonus certificates. These certificates, issued at the beginning of 1925, were redeemable with interest in 20 years, when the average veteran would receive around $1,000. The waiting time to get paid was far from ideal for the veterans. Moreover, by the spring of 1930, the US economy was rocked by failed and shut down businesses and foreclosed farms, following the deliberately disastrous policies of the US Federal Reserve. Another reset was in order. The Great Depression began. This created despair and feelings of a doomed future among the people, and nervous veterans, encouraged by populist politicians, demanded the certificates be paid immediately. Government would need to pay $2.2 billion, at that time more than half of the federal government budget for 1934, which was met with obvious political opposition. The cost of wars are ever present. The result was that 20,000 veterans, calling themselves the Bonus Army, went with their families to protest in Washington. On July the 28th, 1932, Army Chief of Staff Jim Douglas MacArthur led a regular army against the demonstrators. This ended infamously, with many veterans being killed, beaten, or gassed. I bet you don't remember reading about that in your history classes at school. Herbert Hoover, at that time the President of the US, with an already tarnished reputation, was blamed for the terrible incident. The propaganda had begun. With the new presidential election in 1932, new promises were already being made. Freshly elected Roosevelt was soon prepared to accomplish his agenda to transform the structure of the American economy. He announced his intentions to engage in, as he called it, bold, persistent experimentation. And during his first 100 days in the administration, he decided to take the nation off the gold standard as part of his short-term program to stimulate the economy. Now, without the gold standard, the great wealth of the richest independent men in the nation would soon begin to devalue. Though many of the bankers cared little about this, to upset the wealth of the wealthy is never the wisest political maneuver. Outraged and at the same time worried, Wall Street elites started to discuss the possibility of replacing the president with a representative dictator through the use of veterans. They would search for a CEO whose job it would be to please the shareholders and appease the populace. They thought they had found their potential charismatic leader in Major General Smedley Butler, who was seen publicly as a champion and a renowned national hero. And so the seeds were sown. Behind closed doors, in large rooms, on vast estates, the puppet masters set the stage for what they saw as the inevitable and justified long-term security of their livelihoods and incomes. The trouble is that all good intentions have unintended consequences. The language of deceit. Notes and extracts.